The swamp sucked at the air like a living thing. Every few seconds, the cicadas glitched, cutting out all at once, as if holding their breath. The counselors said it was normal. The moss hanging from the surrounding cypress trees, leaning over the wooden walkways like the beards of old bayou swampers, said otherwise. Camp Quanchkin wasn't abandoned, just forgotten, and the swamp didn't like remembering. "All right, let's see if this old girl works," said Thomas, one of the older teen counselors of the camp. He stood up from kneeling beside his reconstructed masterpiece. A pair of long fishing rods were crossed at the end of the dock, lashed to wooden support posts which submerged into the swamp below. Running down the rods and down into a coiled, clammy loop was a thick copper wire which ran through an old rusty tackle box and back up an iron stake a few yards out from the dock. This grounded the experiment into the muddy soil beneath the dark, opaque water. Beneath the rods lay a line of Leyden jars. At least that was the idea. They were nicknamed lightning bottles, filled with swamp water and sealed with metal lids, placed on the dock like a row of glass graves. "This here is the storm hook," said Thomas. "It's an old Camp Quanchkin tradition." The experiment seemed like equal parts prank and ritual, made up of half camp bravado and half bad wiring and electrical know-how. The imaginative nature of it felt improvised and ancient, all at once. "Now stand back, campers. If I have this all rigged up correctly, the flip of this switch should activate the electrical energy in the swamp air and call down a bolt of lightning, and those jars will be shining brighter than high beams." He chuckled to himself, giddy with his contraption. "1, 2, 3, Thomas counted before flipping the switch. Sparks shot out, the tackle box chimed a single terrible note, and the shock rolled out into a shallow, useless wave. The jars rattled and blinked, then went dull as the energy fizzled away.
"Nice try, Brainiac."
The voice came from June, arms crossed, damp braid over one shoulder, one of the senior teen counselors who treated mockery like oxygen. She was leaning against a dock post like she'd been waiting for the exact moment of public failure, before clapping slowly as she approached.
"Very impressive light show. Really thought we were about to summon Zeus or manifest some electric eels or something."
Thomas rolled his eyes.
"But hey, I bet it gave the catfish a tickle."
A ripple of laughter came from the campers, nervous and perhaps slightly relieved. And just like that, the spell broke. The sound of the swamp returned, if anything, a little louder than before. June checked her waterproof watch and checked her schedule on the clipboard.
"All right, science hour's dead. Swim rotation in 5. Goggles on, life vests if you're frogs. Let's move."
A chorus of groans mixed with laughter and a few cheers. Bare feet slapped wood. The young campers scattered toward the boathouse racks, ready to splash in eagerness or dread. It was hard to tell which at Camp Quanchkin. Thomas deflated only a fraction, snapping a copper wire loose like it offended him. He muttered, mostly to himself, "It should have worked." And for a half heartbeat, no one saw it. One of the jars twitched. Not bright, not loud, just a faint pulse. Like it heard something the storm didn't. Half the campers jumped before Pete even gave the go. Water exploded against sunburned legs as they hit the marsh like they expected a lake and got a kiddie pool.
"Way steep,"
groaned Maddie, lifting her arms above the slime line.
"This is false advertising."
"Keep it moving," Pete called lazily from the deeper water ahead. The only camp counselor who looked the part of a real lifeguard. Red shorts, sunscreen stripe on the nose, whistle glinting. He leaned casually against the post where the marsh dropped into actual depth. One hand on a bright lifesaver ring like he was posing for the world's sweatiest brochure. The kids slogged forward, moss tangling around ankles like wet hair as they waded to it. It was then that something brushed Eli's leg. He shrieked.
"Something touched me."
Pete didn't flinch. "It's a swamp, genius. You shouldn't be surprised that there's fish in here." He raised his brows. "Just be glad there aren't any gators." Half the kids laughed, the other half did not. Behind him, the water changed from bile green to black ink depth. The kind that didn't reflect light, just swallowed it. All right, campers, enough of the doggy paddling. Let's start with some breaststroke, Pete shouted out, followed by the shriek of his whistle. June stood back on the dock, arms folded, observing with Olympic-level judgment. For a moment, it almost felt like a normal camp afternoon. Almost. Then the light changed. No warning. One moment it was gold and humid, the next, the air went oddly colorless, like a filter had been slapped over the world. June's head snapped toward the tree line.
Pete?
He noticed it too. Sky going dark at the edges, wind arriving before the clouds did.
All right, swim practice is over until further notice. Back to the dock.
June called, already waiting out, jeans soaking at the knee.
Oh, come on.
Maddie groaned as every camper protested in swamp slaps and sighs. Pete forced a grin to keep it casual, but halfway through the turn, he jerked, like something bit him. Jesus, he hissed, reaching under the water to his thigh. His face changed fast. The joking drained out. Not panic, but something more like confused. June caught the look immediately.
What?
But Pete didn't answer yet. He just kept his hand clamped just below the waterline, where no one could see. Something under there had teeth.
All right, everybody out now,
June said. No clap, no whistle. Just a tone that instantly rewired every camper into obedience. They didn't know what was wrong, but they knew that voice. The swamp exploded with motion. Waist-deep water churned with the stampede. Kids stumbling and half-swimming back towards the dock. The half-rotted planks groaning as feet slammed onto them as fast as fear could rise. "Hey, single file!" Pete called, but the strain under the words gave him away. June was already on the dock, reaching out and yanking kids up by wet arms, one after another. No jokes now, no lazy sarcasm. Pete followed last, favoring his right leg, hands still pressed under the waterline until the final second. When he climbed the ladder, everyone saw it. A bite, clear as a brand. A ring of jagged teeth marks drew blood just above the knee, like something had clamped its jaws on him, then swam away. It wasn't gushing blood, but thick, dark red was already threading down his shin in slow rivers, leaving drops on the wood below. The silence that fell wasn't fear, it was recognition. Even if none of them could say what they were recognizing.
Inside.
June said, too calm, too fast.
Now. Boathouse. Move.
No one argued. Thomas rushed over, leaning in underneath Pete's arm, propping him up to get the weight off his leg. "What could have done that?" Thomas asked. "Sure, there's alligator gar in the lake, but they aren't known to actually bite people, and they certainly wouldn't leave a mark like that. That looks like something a shark would do." "I don't know, man," Pete replied. "It just hurts. It's like hitting me with jolts of pain and giving me a headache." A low growl of thunder rippled across the sky, distant but wrong. No warning wind, no scent of rain yet, just sound. Then the first cold sprinkle tapped the swamp's surface, soft as fingers drumming.
Everyone inside.
June snapped, now aimed at the other counselors too.
Thomas, get him in now.
Thomas hunched further under Pete's arm, guiding him quickly toward the boathouse door. But Pete screamed, not from the pain of the leg, but somewhere deeper, a sound like hot metal meeting ice. He collapsed, body seizing, choking on air as his spine arched backward and slammed him against the dock boards. Thomas flinched back in shock.
Pete!
June barked, dropping to the knee. She wanted to help, but wasn't sure just how. Pete's skin went gray so fast, it looked like the color was being pulled out of him. His lips paled, his pupils blew wide, then vanished. Both irises went full, milky white.
Pete?
June said again, voice softer now.
Can you hear me?
He stopped convulsing. For one long second, he was still, looking directly at the storm clouds above. Then, his face turned towards June, mouth open wide. As he jolted towards her, June fell back as he motioned, not standing, crawling, reaching out, swiping out towards her feet. His bite-wounded leg dragged uselessly behind him, tendon half dead, but it didn't matter. He growled as he moved. "Let's go!" Thomas yelled as he grabbed June off the dock. They dashed through the doorway of the boathouse as Pete lunged, teeth snapping like an animal. The door slammed. something hit it from the outside, hard enough to shutter the frame. Then, like a curtain, the rain hit the swamp all at once. Thomas threw his full weight against the door, breath ragged, one hand still slick with Pete's blood. The rain fell in sheets on the tin roof of the boathouse, a droning, flooding roar. Campers huddled in tight clusters at first, shaking, whispering, until June spun on them, voice low but level.
Hey, eyes on me.
It worked. She had that kind of voice, the kind that rewired panic into obedience, even when she was 2 seconds away from losing it herself.
That was a seizure.
She lied smoothly.
Pete probably fell against a rusty old anchor. His system went into shock. He'll be fine. We're gonna stay inside until the storm passes.
The lie hung there, fragile as glass, and no one bought it. Still, they held on to it, because it was all they had. Thomas, jaw clenched, stayed braced at the door, not moving, not speaking. Then, beneath the flood noise of the tin roof, came something worse. A thump, soft, wet, under the floor. June froze. Slowly, her gaze reached the floor as she lowered herself, palms against the old warped planks, and leaned forward to peer through the hairline gap between the boards. Between shuddering reflections of stormlight, she saw the glow. Not lantern light, not lightning. Eyes, dozens, milky white, ghosted pupils drifting just below the surface. Schooling fish, but wrong. Their movements unnaturally synchronized as they circled beneath the cabin like waiting dogs. Bass, catfish, and shapes bigger than either. Every camper had now backed to the very edges of the boathouse, forming a full ring, breathing hard against the boards as the center of the room yawned empty like a ritual space. June didn't blink, because a shadow was moving through the swarm now, heavy, slow, impossible in size. Then, without warning, a giant flathead catfish erupted up through the floorboards, jaws snapping with a mouthful of curved, pointed teeth as the wood exploded upward in a shower of splinters. Its slime-covered head was old, wrinkled, and moldy like a Hollywood zombie, as it wriggled back and forth, halfway lunging towards June and otherwise trying to work its way free as it slipped back again into the water below. A look of horror was shared on every face, counselors included, as the sound of more thumps began to build. The thumps grew heavier, multiple, directly beneath them, and now horribly, not just thumps, but scraping, like bone against wood. June stood slowly, not frantic, but calculating, the kind of stillness right before someone chooses violence.
Everyone, away from the center,
she said quietly, as if volume itself might provoke the floor. The kids were already plastered to the walls, but they shifted tighter, forming a perfect square ring around the room, every face bleached with swamp light and terror. Thomas didn't look away from the door. "The storm hook," he whispered without turning. "We can use it to shock the water." June didn't answer, but in her eyes something switched. Not disbelief, but understanding. The kind born from lore she wasn't supposed to actually believe. Then she looked at Thomas, and for the first time, she looked afraid. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and her voice came out flint hard.
Thomas, open the door.
No explanation, just velocity. Thomas didn't hesitate. He ripped the door open. Rain slammed into them like a sheet of needles. Pete was already there, standing now but hunched over, face blank, jaw shuddering like an overheating motor. He lunged, but June didn't fight. She body checked, shoulders straight to the sternum. Pete went airborne off the side of the dock, snarling with his arms reaching into thin air as he splashed into a tangled mess of lily pads. June fell to the dock floor.
Go!
June barked. Thomas tore out into the storm, boots hammering against slick planks. The dock lurched under him. Wood shuddered. Something huge slammed from beneath. He didn't even have time to look. The boards of the dock splintered as the same zombified catfish erupted halfway through the floorboards ahead of him, jaws tearing at air, snapping like a bear trap. Its head was mottled white and rotting, eyes filmed over like pearls. Thomas vaulted forward and sideways, hitting the wet boards shoulder first and slid, bumping against each board like the side of a ribcage. The fish dropped back into the swamp with a wet, sucking snarl, then hit again. Thomas winced from the pain on his shoulder as he looked up to an extended hand from June. Adrenaline ignited him as time seemed to slow down and life played out in slow motion.
Run!
June shouted as she shielded herself from a blast of more wooden splinters. Thomas sprinted past the thrashing gap, the rain nearly blinding him. He could still hear Pete snarling from somewhere behind as the dock flexed with each hit from below. He reached the rig and threw the switch. The tackle box screamed, not sparked, screamed. Metal singing like something alive as every jar on the dock vibrated and flooded with white light, glowing from the inside like trapped suns. And then the sky answered. A bolt of lightning came down upon the iron stake as if the storm had been waiting. No pause, no warning, just detonation. For a fraction of a second, Thomas and June felt like they could see every raindrop frozen, suspended in midair, like the storm itself was holding its breath. Then the light hit the rods, split, and exploded across the water beneath the dock, arcing outward in blinding forks, a web, a crown of living electricity spanning outward like molten glass fracturing over the swamp, searching. Every corpse fish hit the surface at once, thrashing, steaming, screaming. The zombie catfish body arced violently out of the water, mouth gaping in a silent howl as steam and smoke rose off its moldy flesh like burning paper. For one holy second, the storm hook actually worked. Thomas staggered forward, blinking spots from his vision, then froze at the water's edge. Pete! His body was floating, face down, limp. Without thinking, Thomas and June hauled him out of the water, dragging his dead weight onto the dock. His skin was ghost pale, that awful milky tint still clinging to his eyes, until he gasped. A raw, ugly breath. The one you make when you break the surface after almost drowning. The white in his eyes faded back to human.
Pete? Pete, hey.
June steadied his head. He blinked, focused. He was alive. The storm began to pass, the rain eased to a whisper. One by one, the campers edged out from the doorway of the boathouse, barefoot on the soaked wood, silent, wide-eyed, as the tension finally broke. Shaky breaths and smiles. Actual smiles.
Holy crap!
Eli whispered,
We cooked the lake!
and they all watched in awe as the sky cleared overhead and the swarm of floating catfish and bass seemed to reawaken, the remaining milky white glaze draining from their eyes as they scattered back into deeper water, disappearing into the depths of the lake. Thomas and June held on to Pete as he finally sat up, drenched, shaking, and the three of them actually laughed. The kind of half-hysterical laugh you only get when you're still alive and you're not entirely sure why. Pete winced, hand pressed against his leg. What the hell happened? Thomas blew out of breath. Believe it or not, a catfish. Pete stared at him. A catfish? June nodded, still rattled, still pale, but absolutely certain.
Old. Mold growing on its head and teeth.
She swallowed.
Like a shark.
See for yourself, Thomas said, turning to gesture behind them. But as they all turned with shock and horror, the water was empty, perfectly still. No floating body, no ripple, nothing at all. The three of them looked back at each other, their happiness fading once more, just as the cicadas began to sing.